I had a coach who really was a yeller, ex-military, really shattered my confidence to the point where I actually started having nightmares about soccer, and confidence and self-image really fall off a cliff right around puberty. And that, like, there's a lot of reasons that can happen, but it looks like at least some of those reasons are related to hormones and this increased risk of depression and anxiety and all of those things. I think the main thing for parents to understand, and really for girls to understand, is, man, the moment you hit those childbearing years, you have some things to deal with.
What advice would you give to the young women who are just starting out, whether it be coaching, players, whatever youth sports journey it is? What advice would you give them?
Greatest things to me about soccer is that it is so physical and it is a contact sport. And for girls in particular, they get to enjoy their bodies and express themselves in their bodies in this incredibly powerful way. Enjoy that, and don't be afraid of competition. Enjoy the competition.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode here of Fighting for Overtime. I'm your host, Coach Tony, as always. And I tell you, I bring the different guests to talk about different topics all the time. And tonight, very special guest, Heidi Smith. She's a women's soccer expert, veteran soccer player, and author now of the brand new Play On, the book that was set to be From Adversity to Advantage through 140 years of soccer. That's a lot of years that soccer has been played. Not what Heidi has played, but what soccer has played. She's a former soccer player and coach for 25 plus years. And beyond the field, interesting, she's a middle school teacher for 13 years. So she has a lot of experiences here dealing with everyone, and she is using all of her experience and knowledge to take us through the 140-year journey I spoke of by way of soccer in our whole new book called Play On. Heidi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'll be honest, every now and then, for being in the PR world and the sports media world, I get sent a lot of different emails from a lot of different publishing houses. And every now and then something strikes me. And when this came in, I'm my daughter's 25. So I'm a big advocate for women's sports. I know what my daughter went through. I coached my daughter for years. We were always second best. We were always waiting for practice time. We always got the worst jerseys. Like, I get it, right? I get it. So when this came in, I was like, wow, this looks really interesting. So, I'm really interested to hear basically what made you, obviously I know where the concept came from, but what made you say, you know what, I need to put this 140-year journey out there?
It was a couple of things. Part of my teaching career was teaching history. And so I definitely am a fan of history. And as a former player and coach, I was interested in just what is this history in women's soccer. But when I went looking for it, it just wasn't there. And there were a lot of books that were aimed at a YAA audience. And there were history books that were really focused on kind of specific eras in the women's game. A lot has been done about England in the 1920s, but there wasn't anything that was kind of a comprehensive look at where we've been and where we're going. And I decided that I wanted to fill that void. And then also I would say it was a bit of, I didn't really realize this going into it, but I think it was a bit of closure for me personally, because there were a number of things that I experienced as a player and a coach where it was like, why did that happen? And this really gave me some of those answers just along the way.
Listen, and for everybody listening right now, Play On, From Adversity to Advantage through 140 years of women's soccer. Amazon right now. I have all the information in the description. Comes out September 9th, right? It comes out September 9th. I was lucky to have the advanced reader's copy. So, and there's a lot of stuff I didn't know, a lot of very interesting stuff within this book. And it gives you said you were a history teacher. It does. It gives you a history lesson. I love going back and looking at history. So, speaking of that, your personal experiences, obviously as a player, as a coach, and maybe even as a teacher, how did they shape the themes in this book, whether it becomes of sexism or identity?
That's a great question. I think so. When it comes to sexism, it's funny because when I was a Title IX baby, I started playing when I was 6 years old, which was the year that Title IX was enacted.
Okay.
And so, and I know that you were a soccer coach as well, or have been. And at the time it began in like that Title IX began, it was right around the same time that soccer was just sweeping all these suburban neighborhoods. And the thing was that nobody really knew what it was or how to play it. And so for a long time as a kid and as a teenager, it wasn't like I was experiencing more discrimination from being female. It was like no one is really interested in this sport. And so we were kind of all in it together. And there was sort of this feeling like it was sort of a suspicious sport. Like you might be for it or communist or something. If you're into this, what's wrong with you? And it wasn't until I got to college that I started to notice, wow, people are treating me differently because I'm interested in playing at this level, and I'm just getting this response that is as if by the mere fact of playing and wanting to play at a higher level that I am somehow this sort of threat to social order, which was just odd. And then when I started looking into the history, that's very much how the media has treated female players for the last 140 years in various forms. And then when it comes to identity, I'm, like a lot of athletes, I had my identity very much wrapped into being a player. And I lost that identity twice, once through just a really negative coaching experience, and then secondly through injury. And so I know what it is to just have that, just to have to grapple with that loss, because it is a loss and a real recalculation of who you are.
No, you bring up a good point. You just said from a negative coaching experience, and it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast a lot, because not only for the achievements of our youth, but the anxiety and the mental barriers that we face. Because a lot of people don't understand that, male or female, doesn't matter. When you're growing up and you have a negative experience, it can really, you just said it can continue to just combine your brain so much that you don't even know who you are anymore. And then your love of the game just goes down. That game that you work so hard to get to, now all of a sudden you don't want to play anymore. So I think that's huge. Now, looking at youth sports as a whole, do you think that, over your experiences, you see more of that happen through your coaching ranks? Obviously not from you, but maybe from players that came to you from negative situations?
So I can't really speak to that too much, just because I've been out of that world for a while.
Okay.
I think that what's happening now, which I think is really positive, is that there is more focus on safe sport. There is more light being shown on all of these issues when you have things like the NWSL scandal coming to light, and then looking at how that played out all the way through all the youth leagues in soccer in the US. I just think there's more awareness, and that's good. It doesn't mean that the issue's gone away, but I think that people are looking at it more. And so hopefully that will shift some things.
Now, looking at being, obviously we talked about how right now the rise of women's sports, and I think a lot of it, obviously, I'll be honest, maybe you may agree or disagree, but I think a lot of this happened a while ago with the USA Olympic team. From a very small scale, obviously not, but they really started to put a spotlight, on like, wow, I know me being a soccer coach for so many years, it was like when we saw that, it was like, wow, this is awesome. And then I started to see a lot more female players in my area, and female teams really start to gel a little bit. And now you have the WNBA and you have things of that nature. So just, what would you say right now, unique challenges would you feel maybe those female coaches or players deal with, or what do you think is the next step for them to go higher?
I think absolutely women's sports is just having an incredible moment. And one of the greatest things about that is that for such a long time, the argument was, well, the investment, there's just not a return on investment. So if we invest in women's sports, well, people don't come, and it's just not going to pay off. And so what we're really seeing now is that people are investing, they are marketing, they are putting in the effort, which they really didn't before. And so there is this incredible surge happening as a result. At the same time, there are fewer female coaches in the NCAA now than there were in like 1980, I believe, in women's soccer. Recruitment is a huge problem in like across age levels. And I think that women still have trouble looking like in terms of representation, in terms of who do I look to as a mentor if I am an NCAA coach or if I am looking to coach at the national team level. It's still like a handful of people. And so that's a challenge. But there's another challenge that is internal, and I want to get into that, but I know you have and it really relates to your next question because it's for females in general. So let's talk.
Sure. I mean, one of my favorite quotes, and I've said this earlier about me coaching softball, and I've had these discussions with people, and they said, "Man, coach told these girls are hard." I'm like, no, it's different. Like, to me, it was always different. And what I mean by that is, girls are very different when it comes to the emotional side of coaching, how to deal with them. And I luckily for me, I mean, I had a daughter, so I understood that part of it. I could say to my wife, like, the hell's going on here? How do I do this? Like, I'm not sure, because I remember I started when they were 8, and the conversations that they were having on the sidelines and the reactions they were having at 8 was a lot different at 13 and 14. So basically, thinking about that, how would you characterize that emotional side of coaching when it comes to coaching females?
So it's a really interesting question. And it's actually one of the questions that drove my interest in this book, because in writing this book, because I'd heard this quote from Tony DiCicco, who was the head coach of the U.S. women's national team in 1999. And he said something to the effect of, the difference between coaching men and women is that if we're having a bad game and we go into the locker room at halftime and it's a bunch of guys, and I say, some of you are you're really not pulling your weight and you got to pick it up. Let's go. Then every single guy in that locker room is going to just say, oh yeah, I know who he's talking about. It's not me, but I know who he's talking about. And if I go into a locker room full of women, say the same thing at halftime, then every single woman in that locker room is going to say, oh God, he's talking about me. And I wanted to know, A, is that true? And then B, if it is true, why? And so I had the opportunity to ask a couple of people who are pretty well qualified to know about this. And one of them was Serena Wiegman, who is the head coach of the England women's national team, just won the European Championship for the second time, actually the third time in a row, twice with England, once with Holland. She's pretty amazing. And she has coached both men and women. And she said, you want to be specific with girls and women. They have a bit more of a tendency to, if you're not specific and you just make sort of a general statement in your feedback, they fill in the gap much more than men do. And it might be more negative. She said being specific is a good idea regardless, but that was one thing. And then another thing she said was that if you're looking at behavior within a team, you really want to get to the root of what that behavior is, because girls, if you're coaching girls, they're going to, again, fill in the gaps, come up with their own reason for the behavior if it's a teammate or whoever, and they're much more likely to go off and form little groups that you then have to navigate as a coach and break that up and bring everybody back together. But then I also got the chance to ask Dr. Colleen Hacker about this, and she was the mental skills coach for the U.S. women's national team through, I think, 2 World Cups and 2 Olympics, and works with Olympic athletes and all these people. And she said a couple of things. The first thing she said was, well, that wasn't Tony DiCicco. That was Anson Dorrance. And that's not true. Okay. So, and she said, there's no, I think I had used the word confidence gap. And she said, it's not a confidence gap. It's an attribution gap. And I went, well, what does that mean? And so she said that research has found basically that we have 2 kinds of stories that we tell ourselves when either things are going well for us or when they're going badly for us. And so we can tell ourselves that there's an external reason. So things went well or badly because of something beyond our control. So maybe someone just was having a bad day, but it wasn't my fault. Or, well, that coach just doesn't like me, or whatever it is. Or it's an internal factor, and it's either I'm amazing and I'm great and this is why this happened, or I'm just terrible and no one will ever love me. And I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the point is, and how it relates to sports, is that men in general, obviously not across the board, but in general, tend to attribute their successes to internal factors. So it's because I'm great, that's why I'm successful, and their failures to external factors like, well, it was just a bad pass. That was my whatever, but it's on something else that's not me. And with girls and women, it's the opposite. So successes are just, well, I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. My boss likes me, whatever it is. And my failures are, I'm just not any good at this. Or Colleen Hacker actually brought up the example of The Bachelor, which I thought was hilarious. Just not what I thought she would be talking about. But she said, on that show, the women are always like, oh, if they get rejected, no one's ever going to love me. It's And I thought that was interesting and certainly resonated with me, just being a woman, how I've experienced success and failure in my life. And so that relates to both players and how you coach girls, just bearing that in mind, but then also women not applying for coaching positions, because Dr. Hacker brought up the fact that with this mindset, a lot of women kind of preemptively take themselves out of the running for positions that they're really qualified for, and that we really see that in coaching. So it applies just to sports in general, I think.
It's a great point, because as you're relating to this, or as you're speaking on it, I'm relating to, and again, it's been 9 years since I was coaching softball before I went to soccer. And when I was coaching softball with the girls, this all related. Like, it's always a confidence thing. It's all like all the time. And it's never when they do well and I'm getting hype and I'm getting excited. It's always, I'm more excited than they are. I'm like, what? Yeah, I just got lucky. They gave me the right pitch. No, like, you've been just working your ass off for 3 hours in the cage yesterday. That's where it came from. But you're spot on about that. I definitely can relate to that for sure. And I mean, speaking, a little more in depth, a little bit, when we talk about girls and women, understanding how hormones impact injury, recovery, and mental health, specifically injury. Because I dealt with, maybe you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but we speak about confidence. Girl gets injured. Maybe her confidence, it takes more time for her to be more confident, with herself out on the field than it does a guy who just thinks, you know what, I'm good. I'm going out there. I'll be fine. How is that a difference when we talk about those hormones when it comes to injury and recovery?
A couple of pieces with that. One is that we've found that I did not do this research, but people.
Okay. Well, we can take credit for this. It's all right.
Thank you. Studies have found that there's definitely a correlation between injury risk of ACL tears in particular, but also of how, like, the severity and recovery from traumatic brain injuries, and then things like depression and anxiety. All of these things relate to hormone cycles in women during their childbearing years. And so you're more likely to injure your ACL at a certain time within your cycle, and you're less likely to recover well from a traumatic brain injury. Same thing. One of the things just that's related to that, but it's not exactly what you're asking about, but I think, you've coached girls, so it's pretty well documented that for a lot of girls, confidence and self-image really fall off a cliff right around puberty. And that, like, there's a lot of reasons that can happen, but it looks like at least some of those reasons are related to hormones and this increased risk of depression and anxiety and all of those things. So when it comes to injury, I think I don't know if it would affect confidence going back on the field so much, but it might affect recovery. I think the main thing for parents to understand, and really for girls to understand, is, man, the moment you hit those childbearing years, you have some things to deal with that men don't have. They have different things, absolutely. But in terms of being an athlete, in terms of how you can take care of yourself, it would be important to know. And like, there are things you can do just with diet and sleep and what kind of workouts you're doing. All of those can be adapted if you know what you're dealing with. But until very recently, we really have had no idea. So I would really recommend that parents educate themselves about that.
I like it. I like it. Again, we're speaking to Heidi Smith, women's soccer expert, veteran soccer player, and author of the all new Play On, which comes out September 9th, From Adversity to Advantage, taking you through 140 years of women's soccer. Now, obviously, this is a youth sports podcast, but a lot of it has to do with anxiety and achievements and mental health. And I always ask my guests to come on because obviously you've been a coach, you've been a player. Have you or someone close to you at any time had their mental health impacted throughout your playing or coaching career? And if you wouldn't mind, even if there's no name drops, obviously like that, but maybe give us an example of what that was.
Yeah, definitely. I think just for context, I would say when I was in high school that soccer really kind of saved my life, because there were a lot of things that were not going so well, and it was the one thing that was going well, and it was the thing I could always count on. And so it meant a lot, and it was very much tied into my identity. But my self-confidence, self-esteem, all of that were a bit patched over with duct tape. So soccer probably had a bit more importance than it maybe should have. And then at the same time, I'd always been the captain of my teams. I'd always just been the person that everyone told me, oh, you're great at this. And I did not have in any sense a growth mindset. I hadn't really had many setbacks, and I was not well set up to deal with them. So when I went to college, I think I was pretty well set up to fail. And then I had a coach who really was a yeller, ex-military, just kind of that combination of factors. I don't think he was a terrible person or anything, but I think it just really shattered my confidence to the point where I actually started having nightmares about soccer. And for about 3 years, I had nightmares of just being in the middle of the field with the whole games just going on around me, and I'm just completely paralyzed, and I'm afraid to move because I know I'm going to make the wrong move. And it just took quite a while to come out of that and start playing again. And yeah, it was definitely, I didn't hate the game, but I was afraid to play it.
Makes total sense. And again, for everybody listening out there, this is why we do it, because I always say that there may be something throughout the course of an interview or a guest that you're going to relate to. And I think there's probably a high percentage of people that are going to relate to this specific example, because we've all had, even when I was in my playing career, we've all had coaches that were overbearing and that, made you, I hate saying hate the game, but you said it perfectly, afraid to play it. That's totally different. And I want people to understand that hating the game and being afraid to play it are two different things. And that's a tough, you said 3 years. That's a really tough experience that you had to deal with. And speaking of that, 3 years is a long time, and 3 years is a long time to keep going through that. And that brings us to that word that you hear all the time. It's burnout. And we talk about the kids of today, whether they be male or female, but just, do you feel these kids today in their particular sport? Now, I know you've been out of the game for a little while, but you were a coach, you were a player. Looking back on what your schedules were like back then, do you feel like they're overworked now today?
When I had a writing business, I was interviewing all kinds of people, and one of them was a child and family therapist. So I'm speaking more from that perspective, but she just said, we're seeing these unprecedented levels of anxiety and depression among today's youth, and that overscheduling is just a huge part of that because like play, just unfettered play, allows kids to self-regulate. It allows their bodies to regulate. It allows them to develop imagination. It allows them to develop creativity, all of these things. And so when you have, I think that when you're always busy, there's no time to just have that just unrestricted playtime like we used to have. Like even recess now is scripted kind of, which is an absolute disaster for all of those intrinsic motivation, creativity, all of that. And so then I think when it comes to sports, I, again, been out of this for a while, but if you've got increasingly competitive play at earlier and earlier ages, then you're taking what was one of the greatest parts of the game to me, which was just all that ridiculous fun we had at practice. When you're a kid, it's like those are, aside from some incredible moments in games along the way, that's really what I remember. And that's what I do see increasingly missing today.
Yeah, the fun. I say it all the time. I mean, when's that time? I always used to make sure that we ended practice with a cool game. Kind of, let's, yeah, we just worked our ass off for an hour and a half, but I want smiles. I want you to go away from this, not like, yeah, I got a good workout, but at the same time, I had memories of moments with my friends, and whether that was playing Lightning or Empower and Finesse or whatever game it is, just to get and it was amazing how they would transition from going hard to just being a kid. And I love it. And that's why I keep saying this, man. Memories and moments are so important to me. They always have been. So I relate to that 100%. Now, do you think this is probably a loaded question, and this could be very generalized, but do you think maybe parents push their kids more today towards a sports career that they don't want, meaning maybe they never had that, or maybe the kid doesn't actually want to play in a high elite travel program, but their parents are pushing them towards it because they're like, no, you have to be up in this upper echelon. You have to play at this level.
What I can say is that I've heard more stories, and this is all just kind of from hanging out with humans, not from being in the coaching world per se, but I'm hearing more stories of parents expressing their disappointment that their kid didn't stick in that program or didn't want to go and play in college, and their kid turning around and just telling them, no, I'm done. And I don't remember hearing those stories like as a coach 30 years ago, but I'm definitely hearing more of them now. And so to me, that's an indicator that there's more coming from the parents, possibly, than there used to be.
Oh, it's let me tell you, you're lucky you're not in the coaching realm now, man, because I'm telling you, it'll blow your mind. It's crazy. It is. And listen, I understand certain ways and wavelengths, but it's just, to me, it's just getting in our hand. Now, as we wind down a little bit, we get back to the book for that just particular success story, maybe either as a coach, a player, as you were coming up, that really sticks with you to today.
I think, I mean, this is going to be such a cliche, but coaching, when I first got this team, sorry, Port Townsend, but it was true. I first got them as a club team, and their real claim to fame at that point was that they had never won a game. This is a group of high school girls, and they just, they had a lot of fun, but that was kind of all they were having. And so I worked with them, and I had help from a couple other folks in the community. They came out and would just do practice. We were all volunteers initially, and I worked with them and worked with them and worked with them, and finally got to that game. I don't remember how far we were into their high school season, but they actually started to click and it came together, and then they scored, and that was, I don't think we even won the game, but it really wasn't important. It was just, they finally got to see, why are we doing all this, and what does it feel like when it works like it's supposed to. And so that was just a huge victory, and we won 5 games that season, which was a losing record, and it didn't matter because it was still just like they were finally understanding the game, and they stopped being afraid. Like they stopped being afraid of the ball, which was also a memorable moment. But yeah.
It doesn't always take a win, right? And I say that all the time. It's not always about. I'm a big believer in memories of moments, and you said it right there. You know, you might not even have won the game, but that was a moment, right there. It was a memory that you still remember to today. I think that that is huge. Now, bring it back a little bit to play on, and in what ways. Obviously, we talked about why you were intrigued by elaborating on the history of the game and this topic. But looking at everything we've just talked about for the last 25 minutes, in what ways does play on confront the culture of silence around abuse in women's sports, and what change do you hope that this book sparked?
In a couple of ways. One of the things that I talk about is the NWSL scandal with the sexual abuse and the verbal abuse and all of the abuse that went on, and the fact that players were really afraid to say anything because they didn't want to undermine the league, because the league was so fragile, and 2 women's soccer leagues had already folded, and so they were really in this incredibly hard position, which I think thankfully we're out of now, or at least we're much better off than we were. Another piece is what's going on right now in Iran with women fans who still are very much struggling to even be able to watch games without getting beaten up or sent to prison. It's gotten a little bit better, but not a whole lot. And the Afghanistan women's national team is in exile, mostly in Australia, not recognized by FIFA, so FIFA has the power to do something about Iran. And FIFA also has the power to do something to recognize the Afghan women's national team, and they're not doing it. So my hope, I guess, on a basic level, is that anyone reading the book just recognizes what is not okay in coaching. And so if they find themselves in a similar situation, that they know the signs and like, wait, okay, let's deal with this. And that FIFA gets inspired, that there's a little more pressure put on them, and that they get inspired to actually act. That would be a good thing.
Pressure works. I will say this, and I really, as I do these interviews and I do these sessions, it's sometimes when the guest talks about specific things, it really says, wow, like this is so relatable. What you just said about this whole dilemma and saga is, in my mind, exactly what I talk about all the time. Like I say, I'm not going to change youth sports. Like I'm not. However, I want to bring awareness to it. And I hope that people who listen to the podcast or listen to some of the streams that I do will say, you know what? Now there are the signs when I have an 8-year-old just starting out as a younger player. When they get to be 12, man, I really have to look out for these travel signs, or the coaching that these experience that they've talked about. So I love that. I do love that answer, because it's so true. Now, how does play on use the game of soccer to explore the deeper themes, and I love this word, of resilience, community, and the emotional toll of fighting to belong? Man, that just goes for fighting for overtime. I love it. That's all fighting to belong.
Wow. Well, I mean, one of the things that struck me in just doing all the research and talking with a lot of people is how much all of these women really have had to rely on each other through all of these struggles. And they very much have. And I think of at one point, and I could not tell you what year it was. It's in the book, but
Yep.
the U.S. women's national team, they were fighting with their federation, and they just weren't getting the pay they deserved, the contracts, all of that. And U.S. Soccer had a habit of saying, okay, well, we're going to bypass you and go to the U19, like we'll go to the U20 team, and you guys are all going to boycott. No, we'll just go with these guys and move on. They got all of the veteran players got on the phone, called all the U19 players. They called all the U17 players, all the U15 players. They got every single player in the entire, like every senior, junior team to boycott. And that moved the mountain. But that was just an example of, wow, just sticking together. And then in terms of the toll it takes, I really think of Canada in the 2023 World Cup. Just with they went into the She Believes Cup that year with their federation threatening to sue the players union, and sue individual players. And all they were asking for was just basic things like just equipment, training camp, getting paid, nothing really unreasonable. And they were really clear that it had a huge impact on their ability to compete in those tournaments, because their livelihood is threatened and they're just given no respect by their own federation. And I think it does take a significant toll.
It's emotionally and physically. That's the thing. It's crazy. I mean, because I say all the time, everybody goes, "Oh, well, emotional is not physical." But emotional turns into physical because it just screws you up so bad that you don't want to do anything. So to me, it just physically completely I don't even know what word I wanted, but it kind of defeats you, so to speak. Now, lastly, what advice would you give? I know this is like such a cliche statement, but it's so true because I will be honest with you that so many times, whether I do self-reflection episodes, whether I have guests on, I always get at least one or two people that either email me or send me a direct message to just thank me for elaborating, or thank the guest for elaborating on certain things that they said. I'm gonna have my daughter listen to this, or I'm gonna have my son listen to this. She needs to hear this. He needs to hear that. So, but for you specifically, because this is built on, on the female perspective, what advice would you give to the young women who are just starting out, whether it be coaching, players, whatever youth sports journey it is? What advice would you give them?
Coaches, I'm going to have to think about it for a moment, but players, if you're thinking about youth players, my answer is a bit of a cliche, and that is just have fun. And it's really those memories, like we've been talking about, that's what you're going to end up with. And the reality is that very few of us are going to play professionally. Very few of us are going to, like, some people will play in college, and that's great. Not to discourage that at all. But for those of us who aren't and didn't, just enjoy it, especially if you're a child and you're starting out. It is a game, and enjoy it. Have fun with it. Enjoy. One of the greatest things to me about soccer is that it is so physical, and it is a contact sport. And for girls in particular, they get to enjoy their bodies and express themselves in their bodies in this incredibly powerful way. Enjoy that, and don't be afraid of competition. Enjoy the competition. Just be the beast that you are. Go out there, enjoy yourself.
I love, I know I've said this a few times, right? But somebody always says something, and you just said the phrase "enjoy the competition." To me, that's I say this all the time. Whenever I do these, I come away with one phrase or one quote that the interviewee has, whoever the guest is, who they have. I had one girl said, "Celebrate your wins." She was always like, I learned now. I'm out of college now. I'm out of collegiate sports, but I wish I would have celebrated my wins more, because I was constantly worried about what's next. Okay, no big deal. What's next? And so you saying that is huge to me, right? I mean, because competition is a big thing, right? Enjoy your competition. I love that. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I love that phrase. Obviously, this came together about a month ago. I've had the book. Fantastic. Again, on Amazon, comes out September 9th. I'm assuming it'll be available on other publishing houses, and but for right now, it's on Amazon. You can pre-order it right now. You can pre-order the Kindle version. Right now, it'll be auto delivered to you on the 9th. I highly recommend it, because I think in today's world, we focus too much on the present and we never look to the past. I yell at my kids about that all the time. That everybody knows and whatsoever that they're NBA fans. Everybody loves Steph Curry, but Nobody wants to look back at, at Michael Jordan years, and nobody wants to look back at Will Chamberlain years. Like there's a historical side to these sports to get us to where we are today. And this book, 140-year journey, especially being, the advantages or adversity to advantage for women's sports that we're seeing now. I'll just tell you, Heidi, this is really fantastic, and I really appreciate you hopping on with me.
Oh, thank you. Well, this has really been a pleasure.
And now, before we leave, do you have anything else coming up? I know, whether it be on Instagram, I know you have, like I said, it will be all in the comments for everybody. But if you're listening, www.heidismith, HEIDISMITH writer, WRITER.com. That'll give you all the information on her book, about the author, and obviously where you can get it. Anything else that I missed or coming up, Heidi?
I believe I'm having a book launch in 2 weeks, but it's not confirmed. So I will let you know about that. Yeah, hopefully.
Listen, I really I wish you nothing but the best. I appreciate you coming on, and for the audience, because like I said, even if it's just that one phrase to enjoy your competition, a lot of the stories that you spoke of is going to resonate with a lot of young females, and I know personally out there that I still help mentor such that are going through soccer right now. So again, I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. That's really encouraging to hear.
Fighting for Overtime is a Rise and React media production. If you're looking to start a podcast, if you're looking to get some direction, hit us up, let us know. We'll help you out there as well. Again, for everybody, enjoy your time, memories and moments, and keep fighting that fight. Continue to fight in overtime to make your kid have the best experience that they can have when it comes to playing youth sports.